Okay, so the really big questions, thinking globally. Is the developing world stuck at the bottom of the sustainable development ladder with such a disproportionate burden of environmental problems due to our eco-colonialism? And what do we do to fix that? What is our ethical, moral responsibility to fix that? So being engineers, there is a nice way to quantify this, actually, I think, and that's by ecological footprint analysis. I hope most of you have been exposed to this, but here is the definition that I like of ecological footprint. For any specified population, it can be an individual, it can be everybody in this room, it can be everybody in this city, in this country, or the whole world. There is an area of land and water ecosystems required to produce the resources that we consume and to assimilate the waste that we produce wherever on Earth that land or water is located. And most importantly, those areas are exclusive areas. Once we use up some of the area, nobody else can use it. We have used it up, okay? That's an important point to keep in mind. Now, so what is happening? Growing the human footprint displaces, we already have seen this, displaces other species from their habitats and their food sources. So we see an extinction rate in terms of biodiversity that probably hasn't been seen on Earth since the meteor extinction of the dinosaurs, at least. And with increasing resource scarcity, it's not just going to be other species. It is, in fact, it's happening now. We are already excluding parts of our species. And these are the poor countries that we have put at a disadvantage as we address climate change. This could be considered a form of apartheid, an eco-apartheid, or colonialism, if you wish. So are the poorest populations being selected out, just like we're selecting out other species, by the way that we are living and using ecosystem services as a society? Well, how did we get there? Well, my contention is that Homo sapiens is an oxymoron. If you know Latin, it means wise man. We are not very wise. We are deeply conflicted and short-sighted as a species. And I think this little cartoon captures that, because this man is saying that while the end of the world scenario will be rife with unimaginable horrors, we believe that the pre-end period will be filled with unprecedented opportunities for profit. That's the way the world behaves now. We make a profit now, and we discount the future value. We cannot continue to do that because we're in danger of selecting ourselves out. Why can we do that? Why can rich countries do that? Because we're rich. It's not just that we have the money, and we can argue a lot about this slide. Is this an ethical distribution of money within the world? I don't want to get fixated on money. It's what we do with our money that matters. And what we do with our money is buy ecosystem services from poor countries. And once we've bought them and used them, they can't use them. Okay? That's the fact that once it's excluded, it's done. This, I think, is a travesty in and of itself, the distribution of income, but as I said, we can argue about that some other time. But what we do with our income is buy eco-footprint. So if the average eco-footprint in a country like the United States, ecological footprint per capita, is about 10 to 25 acres, as it shows on this slide, 4 to 10 hectares. That means that what we've done is force the poorest people in the world to live on a third of a hectare. We've bought their fair share, if you will, of the world's ecosystem services to support our lifestyle. This is what footprints look like on the world map if you did it per capita. The United States, Western Europe, is fat, and by getting fat, we have squeezed the rest of the world down into skinniness, okay? Now, is that fair? I don't care if you think the income distribution is fair. Is this fair? I would say no. And we're at a very critical point now. This slide has a lot of information, so I'll spend a little bit of time on it. But what you see in the red bars is the ecological footprints of various countries in terms of the ecological footprint area per capita, okay? And as I said, in a country like the United States, which is on the left, you see that red bar goes up to about 10. So each one of you, on average in this room, occupies an ecological footprint of about 10 hectares, okay? What does that mean? Well, it means that for countries like India, if you look to the middle of the slide, that their little red bar is down there below 1. Why? Because we've bought their ecosystem services. Now, you could say, why don't we just use our own? Well, that's what the green bars are. If you look at the United States, that's our domestic biocapacity. So the United States is a very wealthy country in terms of ecosystem services. You can see that on this graph here. But we need so much more for our lifestyle that we have to import ecosystem services from somewhere else. That's why the red bar is bigger than the green bar. There are developed countries like Canada and Australia that have such small populations relative to their ecosystems that they are actually exporters. If you look at Canada on this slide, the green bar is bigger than the red bar. So they are exporting, but the export of those countries cannot make up for the world deficit. It cannot bring up those poor countries in the world. And why? Look to the far right. If you look at the ecological footprint of everybody in the world per capita, it is larger than the whole world's ecological capacity. In other words, we have exceeded the Earth's carrying capacity already. From now on, we are just running down the Earth system. And the more people living the way we live, the more we're running down that system. That's the bad news. What do the economists say? Well, the economists say we're going to grow those poor countries to equity. In fact, one of my good friends, Jeff Sachs, who writes a lot about this, that's his answer to the problem. That's impossible. As an engineer, you'll know that. There are certain laws of thermodynamics that we can't violate. And one of them is that the ecosystem services basically are fixed, and once they're used, they're used. So if we were, by a magic wand, if you were to go to every village in the world and make it look like the suburbs out here, maybe you'd think that would be a desirable thing, but it wouldn't be because you couldn't do it, right? Because it would take 4 extra planet Earths to get the ecosystem services to do that. In other words, if everyone were living like you and I are living, we've run out of Earths many times over, and as I say, good planets are hard to find, at least in this neighborhood. So, the really inconvenient truths are that world reductions in material consumption of many things, all resources, and generation of waste have to be diminished by over 90% by 2040 if we're going to meet the needs of the growing world's populations in a fair means. In a fair means meaning that everyone has a fair shot at their share of the ecosystem services of the globe. For sustainability with equity, North Americans would have to be taking steps to reduce our footprints by at least 80% to get down from that about 10 to about 2, which would be the fair world average at current population levels right now. So basically, as I say, we are biophysically, socially, and ethically unsustainable on our current path. The good news is that change, I don't think, has to be painful, but we do have to change. Some people would argue any change is painful, but let me try and convince you that we are chasing the wrong endpoints. So one of the endpoints is the dollar, and you saw we're very good at that because we've been able in this country to accumulate most of the world's wealth. But it doesn't make us happier. There are many studies, that's the plot on the left there is trying to convey this. There are many studies, both cross-sectional and longitudinal studies, that have followed populations as they get richer. And after a certain point of per capita income increase, we don't get happier. In fact, we may get less happy. On the right-hand side, you see that's a subjective thing. We are not subjectively making ourselves better off with what we're doing. Objectively, we're not doing it either. So if you look at some simple health measure, for example, this is life expectancy at birth in years. After a certain increase in per capita income, it levels off, and I would argue that it even goes down. So in countries like the United States, your generation is actually going to live shorter, have a shorter average lifespan than my generation. Why? Primarily because of obesity. Why are we getting obese? Because we're taking all those ecosystem services from the rest of the world and making ourselves fat while we're starving the rest of the world. So we're going to die of overnutrition by starving the rest of the world to death. That doesn't make sense. Where are the Homo sapiens? Okay. The good news is that there are some technical solutions that can help us. In fact, the latest estimates that just in terms of energy use, that we have the technological capability, engineering capability right now to reduce our energy consumption 75 to 80%. And there are other solutions for many of the other consumption issues that we face. It's not enough, but we are there. But the point is that we are not using them. Why are we not using them? That's the bad news. We don't have the intelligence to use them. We don't have the will, the power. The privileged elites with the greatest stake in the status quo control the policy. And this is where you have to come in. This is one of the places you have to come in. Ordinary people like you and me, hold to the expansionist myth, the idea that we can just grow to equity. We can't grow to equity. And we've already overgrown way beyond equity in this country. So we remain in paralysis at the moment. The ecologically necessary is politically infeasible, but the politically feasible is ecologically irrelevant. Okay, so what do we have to change? Since you and I are the problem primarily, we're the ones using those ecosystem services, that's good news because we can change. We have to change institutions, we have to change ideas, and we have to change individuals. And we can change individuals. And in fact, now some of the changes in individuals are being translated, I think, into ideas that will change politics. These are two recent, actually from 2009, clippings from the New York Times. One of them talks about President Sarkozy of France convening a group of economists to redefine what prosperity is for France. It's not just about GDP. He's a little behind the curve because for the last 20 years, in the kingdom of Bhutan, which is very near Bangladesh up in the Himalayas, the former king, it's actually his son is the king now, but the former king said, as Bhutan develops, he's not going to look at GDP as the measure. He's going to look at gross national happiness index. And if you squint really hard, you can see there's a little equation in this article which tells you how you calculate gross national happiness. It turns out that for Bhutan, it's a very happy country. It turns out the United States is not a very happy country by these measures. And I think he's right. I think we are not a very happy country. And so what we have to do is change that. And the big change in ideas has to be that we are currently equating progress and prosperity with growth and consumption. We must stop that. Progress and prosperity does not equal growth and consumption, particularly unlimited growth and consumption in a limited world. And you have to be part of the thinking globally workforce that changes these ideas and these institutions and your own individual behavior. Thank you.